For centuries, Sufism has carried the wisdom of the ages, principles that have transcended time and culture. The core of Sufi teachings is love, unity, and an unwavering connection to the divine. Yet, as modernity advanced, much of this sacred knowledge faded from public awareness. We've been disconnected from the deeper truths that Sufi mystics once lived by. In this video, we journey back to those timeless teachings, rediscovering the ancient path to awakening that the modern world has long forgotten. Sufi mysticism is more than a set of beliefs. It is a way of being, a way of seeing the world. It's a profound connection with the essence of existence itself, rooted deeply in the heart. But how did these ancient masters communicate their wisdom? Through a language that transcends words, poetry, symbolism, and silence. They didn't merely teach, they embodied their knowledge, passing on the essence of divine love in ways that speak directly to the heart. Sufi masters understood something the modern world has forgotten, that truth is not found in doctrines or dogma, but in direct experience. To them, the divine was not a concept to be believed in, but a presence to be felt, lived, and dissolved into. Their path wasn't about control or conformity, it was about surrender. The ego, with all its noise and fear, was seen not as an enemy to fight, but as a veil to be lifted. And through lifting that veil, they claimed, you wouldn't find emptiness, you'd find the beloved. The beloved wasn't just God as an idea, it was the living presence of divine love, pulsing through all creation. Sufi poetry called this out over and over again. Every line from Rumi or Hafiz wasn't just poetic beauty, it was a map, a guide through the chaos of the self, back to the simplicity of the soul. In the silence between the lines, something was always waiting, an invitation to come home to your own heart. To the Sufi, the path to awakening was never about escaping life. It was about diving fully into it, then seeing through it. Every experience, whether joy or sorrow, was a doorway, a test, a mirror. They didn't reject the world, they used it. Pain was not something to be avoided, but to be transformed. Beauty was not to be possessed, but to be surrendered to. In every heartbeat, every breath, every ordinary moment, there was a sacred opportunity to remember the source. Sufi mystics taught that love is not a feeling. It is the fire that burns away separation. When you love truly, your boundaries dissolve. You stop being you and start becoming part of something infinite. That's why so many Sufi poems speak of madness, drunkenness, and losing oneself. They weren't metaphors for chaos. They were descriptions of the mystical state, where the mind finally lets go and the heart takes over. That's where real transformation begins, not in knowledge, but in surrender. If you feel the ego resisting, stay, subscribe and ring the bell. This path wasn't made for comfort, but for freedom. The Sufi didn't chase truth by force, they courted it like a lover. They whispered to it in poetry, waited for it in silence, and recognized it in the beauty of everyday life. The ego wants to grasp, control, and explain. But the heart, trained in Sufi tradition, learns to listen, to open, to melt. This is why the great Sufi masters taught in paradox, because truth can't be boxed into logic. It must be felt, lived, and surrendered to. That's why so many Sufi teachings come as riddles, as songs, as metaphors that invite reflection rather than instruction. They understood that the mind is loud, but the soul is quiet. And to hear the soul, one must become quiet too. Their practices weren't about outward rituals, but inward transformation. Silent meditation, breath, turning inward, these were their tools. While the world sought noise, validation, and answers, they sought stillness. And in that stillness, they found a clarity sharper than any intellect could offer. Not because they had more knowledge, but because they had less noise. Sufi mysticism speaks not only to the heart, but also to the body. Movement, rhythm, and breath were all tools used to realign the human soul, with the divine pulse of the universe. The whirling dervishes didn't spin for performance. They spun to dissolve, to blur the lines between self and source. In that spinning, the ego is confused, the mind releases, and something deeper takes over, a rhythm older than thought. It's not about forgetting the self, but seeing through it, until all that remains is stillness in motion, and motion in stillness. This is why the Sufi way was always centered around presence, being fully in the now, whether in joy or pain, whether in solitude or union. They didn't rush to escape suffering. They stayed with it, listened to it, let it teach. Because they knew that within suffering, a doorway often opens. Not every pain is punishment. Some are invitations. And when accepted, they become sacred fires that burn away illusions, leaving only what is real. That's the alchemy the Sufi lives for. The deeper you go into Sufi teachings, the more paradoxical it becomes. The Sufi doesn't seek to escape the world, but to embrace it fully. They don't reject materialism or wealth. They simply recognize that these things are temporary. The true richness is in the soul. True wealth isn't gold or silver, but love, compassion, and divine connection. In their eyes, material wealth is just a tool, not the goal. It's the love behind all things that carries real power. This love, when felt deeply, transforms the seeker. It frees them from the need to grasp or control. It dissolves the ego, leaving only purity and clarity. But this love doesn't come easy. It takes years of devotion, of seeking, and of surrendering to the divine. The Sufi doesn't look for shortcuts or instant answers. They know that the heart must be prepared to receive the light of truth. This is where many fall short in the modern world. They want quick fixes, immediate results. But Sufism teaches that the divine path is not about shortcuts. It's about transformation through patience, love, and presence. The modern world teaches us to accumulate status, knowledge, success. But the Sufi path is about emptying, not because things are bad, but because the cup must be empty to receive. To the Sufi, unlearning is as sacred as learning. Letting go is as powerful as holding on. They walk through life with open hands, not clutching, not clinging. In this surrender, they find true freedom. The freedom to be, to love, to dissolve the boundaries of self. It's not an escape from life. It's a return to life, stripped of illusion. This kind of freedom isn't loud. It doesn't shout or demand attention. It's quiet, calm, radiant. It doesn't make you rise above others. It brings you deeper into yourself. That's why Sufi masters never sought fame or followers. They became invisible on purpose, because only in invisibility could they fully dissolve into unity. In a world obsessed with image and identity, they chose presence over performance. That choice, again and again, became their gateway to divine union. As we close this journey into the depths of Sufi wisdom, remember that the path to the divine is not a linear progression, it's a spiral. Every return to the source takes you deeper than before. The more you surrender, the more you discover that the divine was never outside of you, but always within. Sufism teaches us to look inward, to listen to the heart, to allow love to guide us. In that love, there is no distinction between you and the divine. It is all one. The world will continue to distract and demand your attention. But if you listen closely, you'll hear the whisper of your soul, calling you back to your center. The Sufi does not chase after truth, but allows it to unfold naturally. Through silence, through poetry, through deep connection with the divine, they find the way home. A way not of the mind, but of the heart. And that way, once found, is eternal. The teachings of the Sufi are not meant to be learned in a classroom, but to be experienced through the heart. They remind us that all the wisdom we need is already within us, waiting to be remembered. It is not a knowledge to be acquired, but a truth to be revealed. The path is not a destination, but a way of being. one that leads to the dissolution of the self and the union with the divine. What if everything you call you was never really yours?